$310,000 was the average sales price of a home sold for sale by owner, whereas $410,000 sold by a realtor.
I don't know about you, but I don't want to leave that much on the table.
No, me neither.
Welcome back to the Modern Agent Podcast. My name is Logan Ricchetti with Modern Realty. This podcast is a combination of thoughts and opinions on the real estate market in Midland, Michigan with our local real estate agents from Modern Realty. Our mission is to create informed and confident buyer and seller clients, so tune in to learn more about Midland's real estate market.
Welcome to the newest edition of the Modern Agent Podcast. I am Cassie Cohoon, and I am here with my good friend, Jennafer Tipton.
Hello.
We are here today to discuss our new Modern Agent client roadmap. And we're going to be here to talk to you about this because there's many things that have changed in 2024 with real estate. Real estate has expanded its paperwork, let's say, in regards to a little settlement by the National Association of Realtors this year in March. I want to start by saying that the NAR settlement was a realistic lawsuit brought by some lawyers from Missouri that took on several sellers, and it went very high up into the courts. I believe even the Supreme Justice, if I remember right. Okay. All right. So, Jennafer, I'm super excited to be sitting down with you and talking about the client roadmap. Logan and as well as all of us as agents sat down and really dove deep into what the expectations of our buyers and sellers are going to be.
Sure.
And I feel like we've created a great roadmap for our clients to fully understand what the new regulations are in regards to the NAR settlement. The NAR settlement caught us
a little off guard.
Yeah, a little off guard. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say that's because we expected or didn't feel like we were being honest with our clients.
No, definitely not. I think it's because there were so many misinterpretations of the lawsuit from the media to social media to agents not fully understanding what was happening and not effectively communicating that with their buyers and sellers.
I truthfully feel that there's still a lot of misconceptions.
Very much so.
So the lawsuit, in short, was brought up by some sellers in Missouri that were not interested or not happy or felt that they were not disclosed what compensation that it can be negotiable, right?
Sure. So I've had so many people ask me, oh, this lawsuit now the commission is negotiable. So what do we do from there? And my response is, it's always been negotiable.
Yes, absolutely. Commission has always been negotiable for buyers and for sellers. The big change, though, is that buyers have to be very much more informed.
Definitely.
About how the process is going to work for them because it's not always written in black and white anymore.
Sure. Okay. It's definitely changed.
The main three things were that the MLS could not distribute how much you were going to get in compensation.
Sure. Yeah.
That we needed to have written agreements with buyers.
With the buyers.
And the third thing was that the 500,000 or so sellers had basically said that they can opt out or opt in. That was the third agreement thing, which really has nothing to do with us. But those were the three main standards. Okay, So basically all the plaintiffs could either opt in or opt out of receiving a settlement. So what Modern did was take that information and make sure that we are informing our clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
which is the most important part of the process.
Absolutely. So talk to me about how when you're speaking with your sellers, right, how are you approaching the idea of negotiable compensation? I mean, not that it's any different than you used to, but how are you being more articulate about that?
So for us, there's not a whole lot that's really changed with it because like we said, it had always been negotiable before. However, not that there was an industry standard at all, but there was, this arbitrary thought of
clear guidelines between
agents and what we, what had been set in the future in the past before. So typically that was 3% for the buyer's agent, 3% for the seller's agent. Now that always got paid from the seller. The lawsuit got brought up because a couple sellers felt like they got the short end of the deal there.
Misrepresented in how it was explained to them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So with that, the only thing that's changed now is that the expectation for the buyer's compensation is now kind of put back on the buyer rather than the seller, unless the seller chooses to do so, which in our beautiful client roadmap describes why it's a good idea for the seller to incentivize the buyer's agent to bring them the buyer.
So when we talk about sellers, right, like we really dive in. When we talk about sellers, 89% of all homes listed in 2023, and I think it was 91% in like 2018, were all listed with realtors, or percent of homes listed with realtors, okay? So we basically had 89% of all homes listed in Michigan and the United States listed by realtors.
Yes.
Now, it allows the sellers to have access to all of the buyers that are also represented within that field, okay?
Yes.
Only 7% of homes are sold for sale by owner, 7%. And of that, 54% of them are actually a family member or someone they know.
Correct. So it's not like they're not reaching very far to sell their home when they're doing it for sale by owner.
And there's a huge gap also. I want to point this out. If there's sellers out there listening to this, there's a huge gap in the amount you receive from your home if you're for sale by owner versus with an agent. So as of last year, it was $310,000 was the average sales price of a home sold for sale by owner, whereas $410,000 sold by a realtor.
I don't know about you, but I don't want to leave that much on the table.
No, me neither. I mean, that's a huge difference. Now, some of that could be the type of properties that were being sold. It is much more common in rural areas where markets may not be as high. But let's really think about that. If you're a seller, the advantage of using an agent is there's a multitude of reasons you should use an agent.
Absolutely. And it doesn't just fall on just using a listing agent, but then it also is using a buyer's agent as well. Having that buyer represented by an agent, bringing them to your listing, that's what helps you get the most amount that you can for your house, which is ultimately the most important piece of that.
I'm going to use this example, okay? So let's say I am going to build a house.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to build a house, and I go to talk to Builder A, and Builder A tells me that it is going to cost me approximately $100,000 for my land and basic foundation, and then the rest of it is negotiable.
Right.
I don't know how much it's going to cost me for framing. I don't know how it's going to cost me for finished work. I don't know how much any of it's going to cost. But we'll figure that out as we go along.
Sure.
And then I go talk to a builder. And the second builder says, I can tell you that if we work under these set of specific circumstances, it is going to cost you X amount of dollars to build your home. Which builder are you going to choose?
Option B, please.
Right. If I'm meeting with a seller and I'm explaining to them that I can bring them 80% of all buyers who are represented by a buyer's agent, as well as anybody who's going to call us that isn't represented, and we can know what our finishing amount would be pre-listing.
Absolutely. I think I would want to know for sure versus randomly.
Let's try and use that opposite force, though.
Yep.
Okay, so some agents out there are going with the idea of let's put this house on market and see what the buyer's agents want.
Yeah.
What's your theory on that?
Well, I have real mixed emotions about it. There's a lot of agents who don't want to take their clients to see a home that is not incentivizing them to work. We as agents do, I'll say 99.9% of our work up front before we ever see anything. So it's really hard for us to go to work every day, drive everywhere, have all of our expenses out in up front without getting paid. So I understand where some of them come from, where they shy away from those houses that are not incentivizing them to bring their buyers. On the other hand, that's what we do.
Right.
That's how we get our buyers to the closing table. We have to do that stuff. But trying to explain that to a seller and getting them to see the value of that, I mean, it's black and white in our client roadmap,
right,
of why you should do that.
I mean, being as a seller's agent, it is absolutely vital. And I talk to my sellers very, very uniquely about this. I say, listen, it is 100% negotiable. Yep. But do you want the full advantages of being able to market your property with videography, photography, as well as making sure that we're bringing the biggest buyer pool at the best reasonable price?
Absolutely.
Now, in today's market, this is another thing that sellers also need to realize. We have, throughout this year, had I called it in my last podcast an evening, meaning that buyers and sellers, yes, there's still a shortage of homes, but buyers are being much more particular about the properties they want.
Most definitely.
And are not going way over and asking. Okay.
No, and I always refer to these as disposable mortgages when interest rates were, I'm going to say, anywhere under 4%. you could afford to take the risk to buy the house that you didn't really love.
Yes.
It didn't matter.
Yep.
Because your interest rate, your holding costs were so low. Now that they're a little bit higher, which is still historically pretty low.
Correct.
People are getting tighter on things. They're getting pickier about things. They're not just diving into anything.
And that makes a huge effect for the sellers.
does.
So making sure that sellers understand to have the max amount of buyers through their home is one of the most important things.
Absolutely.
It's also about them being able to know up front those costs, just like the buyer analogy, right?
Yeah.
Or the builder analogy. We got to know how much money we're putting out so we know where our bottom line is. And that's a really important aspect.
Because ultimately, that bottom line, I'll say that probably affects 75% of the sales or the listings that we have.
Yeah. And I can't imagine walking in not knowing what that number is going to be.
No.
I would much rather know that I'm getting the max pool and getting everything through.
Absolutely.
There's a couple other things that with sellers that are kind of important right now. The current market is taking, its normal turn. We see it every year through quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. You see the uptick or the decline in the days on market.
Yep.
And then the increase in the days on market. But what I am seeing right now, and I don't know if you are as well, is an increase in property price adjustments mixed with days on market.
I cannot even believe it. So, as agents, we have, our collaboration centers that we can set up with our clients so that our buyers are seeing all the houses that hit the market when they do. They get an email with that house in there. We also get an email too, so we can see, so we're on the same page as everything. But, in the last couple of years, it's just all been new listing, new listing, new listing, new listing, new listing. But I'm starting to see so many
price
adjustment emails, price adjustment email, price adjustment. So a huge advantage to listing with the listing agent is that pricing strategy. Mm-hmm. Days on market are a killer for a house. That's
Absolutely.
probably the number one killer of your listing. You want to make sure that you have that house accurately marketed so that you don't sit on the market for a long time.
I mean, currently there are actually 98 properties still in Midland County. 98.
Woo!
That's how many are in Midland County, how many active. But they're sitting at 57 days. 57 days for active houses. Now, of course, there's some underliers in there that push that number up.
Yeah, but mostly,
that's real.
I mean, I'll say realistically that the outliers are there probably because it's just not accurately priced.
And I agree with that. And also, I think the seller's expectations got so high.
They definitely did.
It was a hard conversation to have with some sellers about that. Hey, what you're seeing as your market value is not what I'm seeing in the data.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, just because we see it in the data doesn't always mean that that's necessarily what's going to happen either.
Absolutely. Right.
The market changes day to day, and the market's ultimately going to tell us what your house is worth.
Absolutely.
We can get as close as we can with the data, but at the end of the day, I call them attractive houses. The houses that are attractive, the houses that are nice, move-in ready, turnkey, and they're accurately priced. Those are the ones that are still going quick. Mm-hmm. And they're not staying on the market.
But we have a lot of sellers who are trying to unload properties that may need a roof or may need refinishing or may need updating.
Even small things, as far as paint. There were so many sellers that could get away with not doing some of the small things in 2021, 2022 in there. And they didn't have to worry about those little things. Buyers were so eager to get into places that they were willing to do those things. Where I'm not seeing that a whole lot anymore.
I mean, you have two classes of buyers.
Absolutely.
Right. You have buyers who are do-it-yourself or first-timers.
Yep.
And then you have, I'm not doing a thing. There's a crack in that plaster.
Yeah.
There's a crack in the plaster.
Yep. I don't like that wall color. We're not buying this house.
We can paint. I promise you. Okay, so as far as the changes within NAR that affected buyers, when you sit down and I guess I'm going to start with the fact that whenever I have a new buyer, my first step is to sit down with them and have a buyer consultation.
Absolutely.
There is no question whatsoever that I am never going to not sit down with a buyer before I go and show them a house. Now, are there exclusions to that? There are small examples of that. But
I would say even so, even when those things come up like that where we have to see the house immediately, I still take that opportunity while we're at the house to explain the process, bring our roadmaps, go through things, because this is a huge process.
I mean, there's 18 small steps into buying a house, okay?
Yep.
It sounds minute to say 18 small steps, but the back end of what we're doing as a buyer's agent and what our buyers actually feel is different. It's 18 small steps. The biggest change, so we do that buyer's consultation, right? And after the buyer or during the buyer's consultation, we talk about the current changes of the NAR settlement and what that means to them.
Yes, absolutely.
The first thing we have to do is get an exclusive agreement with them, right?
Which is not a huge difference to a lot of brokerages. A small difference to our brokerage and our clients. I'll say we had probably more of a
handshake.
Yeah, handshake style agreement, more loyalty based than contract driven.
Right. And, I haven't seen a change. I do want to note that I haven't seen a change in the amount of buyers that want to work with me after explaining this to them.
No, not at all. But sometimes people can get a little bit finicky about signing a contract.
Right.
Which I understand.
So this exclusive contract basically states that in the event, there's multiple ways to do it, but the way that is most common in certain practices currently, it states that there is going to be a percentage of the closing purchase property that would be paid to the buyer's agent. And there's multiple ways to make that happen, which is
absolutely. There's not just one way.
Right. They've totally laid that out. We may not be able to list compensation in the MLS, but we can make a phone call to an agent beforehand to make sure that our buyers are protected. Okay. And that's important to me is I'm making lots of calls to agents or text or emails.
Yep. Communication.
And if your agent's not willing to do that and is just putting a flat, notation in their purchase agreement and trying to represent you, they're not doing their due diligence to maximize how much you're paying for a house.
Yeah.
The amount you pay for a house is directly correlated to how much you're paying to have your buyer's agent.
Yeah, most definitely.
A buyer's agent, though, does represent you through inspections, appraisals, title work, making sure your home insurance is set up right, ensuring that any issues that are, like, for instance, for me, for an FHA buyer, I'm walking through that house with my buyers, already pointing out to them what we're going to have to do in order to
get the appraisal to pass.
Exactly.
Yep.
There's so many elements to that. But in our new client roadmap, it's pretty nice because it's broken down how those compensation things can happen, okay? So there are 4 major ways that a compensation package can happen. Compensation is offered by the listing broker, meaning that you as a seller's agent have signed a contract after negotiating that would allow the buyer's agent to be paid.
Yep.
Now, that was how the common practice was done before. Yep. Now we just can't put it in the MLS. And it is still very common. 98% of any of the contracts I'm currently writing are still in a broker's agreement between the listing.
Yep.
Okay. The second way that it's done is they have offered a negotiable amount. And we've talked about that. Yep. The negotiable amount that a seller wouldn't know how much they're paying until the buyer's agent decides what to write in the contract, which makes absolutely no sense to me from a seller's agent's perspective.
Yeah, me either.
The third way is, of course, you can use seller concessions.
Yep.
And then the fourth way is you actually, as a buyer, get to decide and pay your agent. It's not written in there that we are going to take all of your money because, one of these things didn't happen. We're going to do our best to represent you and get you the best price for the home.
Absolutely.
But those are the 4 ways for offer strategies. If we get to number 4, we'll figure it out. That's what agents do.
100%.
And most of the times, it's not even an issue that we have to deal with.
I'm going to say probably 9.5 times out of 10, it's not an issue.
But it is nice that Logan and Modern for us. We have it directly in front of you so that you can't ever feel that you're going to need to sue NAR.
Right.
We're not suing NAR today.
Yeah. I think this, the biggest thing that this client roadmap does is it creates our confident and informed buyers and sellers, which is the most important piece of this whole thing. And I'll say probably the biggest thing the biggest reason for the NAR settlement is that people were not confident in their process.
I think a lot of it was and again, I was never there in any of these conversations.
Sure.
But complacency.
Absolutely.
Feeling that this is just written, the contract terms state that this is negotiable, so I don't really need to tell you that this is negotiable. Right. It is negotiable, but I'm also going to look at you straight in the eye and say, would you work at a $20 an hour job if they said we're only going to pay you $10? Would you do the best job?
Right.
Like, are there agents out there just saying, I'll take less because I do less?
Absolutely. I think that for sure. I mean, we see that every day. Whether it comes from, I'll ruffle some feathers here.
Don't ruffle any feathers. You leave those feathers over there.
Cell phone pictures on listings,
yes.
Things like that. I always tell my sellers that I use their listings as my resume. This is the best, my listings are the best thing that I can show off to other sellers. So making sure that that listing is top notch and that it has professional photography, and that if it needs to be staged, that house is staged. Videography, walkthroughs, floor plans, custom listing descriptions, making sure that all of the information is in there and it's correct, helping them fill out the paperwork so that they understand what they're signing, what they're advertising. That's the only time that I get to shine. As far as
what I've done.
Yeah.
You can't sit there and tell them, well, I negotiated a contract for someone, right?
Right. No, they get to look at my listing and see what it looks like.
Absolutely.
In comparison, if they're interviewing other agents, which by all
go
means,
ahead.
You should
interview some other agents.
Should.
I love to contend with other agents, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
I truthfully feel that if I am interviewed against other agents, it shows what I really can offer.
Absolutely.
There is no reason for me to be shy against that, because if I'm a strong and confident agent, I'm going to explain to you more articulate and maybe a little more humor filled, because that's me. But we're going to find personalities, ways to work together so that you feel comfortable.
And there's a lot of different, and I tell people that I talk to too, and this is kind of off topic a little bit too, but at the same time, when they are looking at agents to hire buyers and, as a buyer's agent or a seller's agent, you have to get along with those agents.
Absolutely.
You're about to embark on probably the biggest financial decision that you're going to make in your life. You should be able to be comfortable with that person. You should be able to talk with them. There should be a level of confidentiality between you two. It's so important to be comfortable with them.
If you're not comfortable with your clients, then you're in the wrong skin. Does that make sense? Like, we have to be able to talk to our clients like they're our mother, brother, sister, cousin. Yeah. And for all of those people to be treated the same as such.
Absolutely.
Right? The confidentiality especially. Yeah. As a realtor, we might not only just sell houses, but we're emotional support buddies.
Yeah, therapists.
Yep. We also sometimes are cleaning ladies.
Cleaning ladies.
Yeah,
I've done that.
I've done
countless
times.
Yep. And that's okay.
That's okay. That's what we're here for.
It's all right. I don't, there's some agents that I've run into before that would, I can't believe you would do that. Well, why?
I'm here for them.
Sometimes people need help.
Absolutely. And that's another thing is not every buyer and seller is in the best financial decision. And that's what it really scares me.
That's a big, probably one of the most important pieces of when we're talking about commission and how much you're going to pay, whether it's from both sides or however your structure is going to be set up. If you're not in a good financial spot, we need to be able to work backwards with those numbers.
Absolutely.
And sometimes maybe something has to change a little bit or something, but at least we know where we need to be and we can guide you through that.
I've definitely felt in times that the hardest homes to help sell are definitely the homes that are closer in
tight
numbers.
Yes,
okay.
Sure.
Or divorce situations, but that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
That's a whole different.
That's a different world.
That's a different world.
Yeah.
Representing your buyers and sellers in such a way that you can make sure their financial numbers come out at the end in a good way is one of the most important elements of why I feel my job is important.
Yeah. Which is why it's so important to have that hard
conversation
in the beginning. And then it just goes back to incentivizing the buyer's agent is always going to net you the most.
Yes, or net
always.
and you're also going to net the most because you've had
the most exposure.
The most exposure, the best videography, all of those things that allow you to feel like you got the best offer you possibly could.
Absolutely. Yeah. We left no money on the table.
None.
By incentivizing both the listing agent and the buyer's agent. Because let's be honest, the buyer's agent is going to work just as hard as that listing agent did too.
I mean, in some cases, I feel
Most
the buyer's
definitely.
agent works harder than a listing agent. And I'm there. I've said it, you listing agents out there. Buyer's agents work harder in some cases than a listing agent.
I have worked with buyers, and before I even say this, I will say this is 100% okay. I have worked with buyers for 3 years before we found a house for them.
And that...
At the end of the day, when I get that commission, I probably didn't make anything on that.
$0 made.
Because I looked at so many houses. I drove to so many houses. We were under contract twice. Things like that happen. But incentivizing the buyer's agent to bring you that buyer is probably I'll say the second most important piece of your home selling process. I think the first piece is accurately pricing your home.
Accurately pricing and obviously preparing it.
Oh, yeah, for
preparing and accurately pricing is 100%.
You get one shot for the first impression.
Yeah, I think Eminem said that once. Taking ourselves to a little bit of a different zone, I know that the market is changing in different areas a little bit differently. Okay,
Yes.
so Midland is a little bit different than, let's say, Bay City.
Oh, for sure.
Okay,
For sure.
So when we're talking about current market and we're talking about the areas in which we work, I know sometimes you work in Gladwin and Beaverton. I work up there sometimes. I mean, you obviously work up there a little bit more than I do, I think.
That's just because that's my hometown.
Well, my hometown is an hour and a half away. But no, looking at Bay City's market, and it is actually up and coming in some areas.
It is, for sure.
And it is an area in which people can still find marketable value homes that they can still increase the value on.
Yeah.
I feel that Midland is hitting somewhat of a plateau. Do you feel that?
I do. I feel that a little bit. I think, and this is just my perspective of it, the flood, I think, had a lot to do with that because there were so many houses that were flood damaged that were already in distress. Mm-hmm. So,
and the lack of houses caused by that.
Yeah, most definitely. But we had a huge influx of repairs, of flips, of, things like that. So I think that did create some of that plateau that's happening a little bit. I'm seeing less homes that need significant repairs.
Not to be politically motivated, but I think inflation is also playing a part in
for
that.
sure.
So, I mean, these are all elements. Like we sit here and talk like we're, just real estate agents. We're not. We
There's
are people that
so
have to
much
deal
that
with
go
so
into
many
it.
different things, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we can look at the market data and try to address things, but let's be honest, the market data is not reflecting what's happening right now either.
No.
We're getting closer to the election. That's going to change some things. So that doesn't necessarily mean that what your house could have sold for 6 months ago is what it's going to now.
Yeah. I think the change in interest rates slowly coming down. I think the election has halted some people from moving. And I think that plays a little bit on our days in market.
Well, and I think where we're at in the year also. So typically, I know, like for my business, I always slow down around the school, when school starts. I think everybody does. That's kind of our little lull there. Nobody wants to move when the kids are going to starting school.
Absolutely.
But we're playing right into the election too. So we've got, the start of school, followed by the election, followed by the holidays.
But if you look at the actual graphs over time, that's very similar, and elections do affect it somewhat. But I think that inflation has changed the pricing of things. I think that the interest rates have changed the pricing of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think also inventory. One thing we really haven't talked about is how much inventory plays a huge part of what's selling and what's
supply
not
and
selling.
demand.
There is absolutely nothing to sell that's in good condition. You're not going to be able to sell it.
Right.
I've had examples come from people where they basically couldn't find a house, decided not to look for a house, and then the house comes on market, and here they go, right?
Yep.
I've also had sellers who put a house on market, and we thought that we had overpriced, but in all actuality, the buyer didn't enter the market until 2 weeks later when they finally got a pre-approval. So there's so much unknowns in real estate. You can only do the best to communicate with your buyers and sellers.
It's always comical when you have a house that has been on the market for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden you have multiple offers.
It happens.
It does.
It does. And it really might have to do with everybody going on vacation at the same time or different things. So we never really know.
Okay, so like we had kind of touched on, there's so many different situations that come from buying and selling. Divorces, babies, new jobs, first homes, downsizing, things like that. When interest rates were low, it was very easy to move through this process.
It was.
It was okay if you had to hold your house, if you had to make 2 mortgage payments for a month or two, was not a big deal, especially with the super low interest rates that we were at. I'm not seeing that so much anymore as I was before. People need to sell their house before they can buy their next one.
I feel like that also goes along with the fact that interest rates are higher, like you stated. Okay, so we can't. Can you or can't you? Will you or won't you? We talk about that a lot. Can you or can't you? Will you or won't you? Can you buy your new home without selling your other one?
Sure.
Or can you not? And that's why we always say contact a lender right after we meet with a buyer or a seller. And if you can't you? And if you can, do you want to?
Right.
Are you comfortable thinking about the fact that you're going to have 1 to 2 mortgage payments possibly on both homes? Or can you, and you're comfortable making sure that we can stage your old house as best we can? The best reality for any seller that's doing this is all in, buy a new house, let's get you out of the other one.
For sure.
And then sell it.
For sure.
But financially, that's not possible for some buyers and sellers, especially when you talk about different life changes.
Yep. And it's probably, I'm going to say it's much more than 50% that it's not possible for them to do that.
I mean, here's the honesty. I know that I could not purchase my new home if I ever wanted one without selling my current home.
I don't know if I'd want to.
I mean, I would want to. Let's see if I could, right? Like, I mean, that's the reality of some places out there.
I always look at everything as to where I put myself in my buyers or sellers' shoes. Would I do the same thing that I'm asking them to do?
Right.
And I think that helps us navigate through a lot of things.
Well, helping a client from the point of you being emotionally connected with them and understanding how they feel is probably one of the most. It's not written down in your code of ethics that you have to be emotionally, connected to your buyers or sellers, or your clients or friends. I don't know why I call them buyers and sellers. Typically, they're all my friends.
Yeah,
we can call them my friends.
If we're new, we're going to be friends.
Right. If we're new, you're still my friend. We're always going to be friends, and from now on, we're going to call each other on birthdays.
Yep.
But being able to have those hard conversations about buying and then selling, or the strategies of selling. Here's an example: selling contingent or buying contingent to selling your home in today's market. House just comes out on market. It's 2 days on market, and it's multiple offer scenario. And we have to strategize a way to write an offer for you that you can win, even though you're contingent to the sale of your home. How are we going to be able to navigate that?
Well, first and foremost, our most important piece of it is to talk to the lender.
100%.
We need to figure out what they can do and what they can't do, like you had touched on too. But then we just need to kind of reach to other pieces of the contract. What is important to that seller?
Absolutely.
That we're looking at purchasing? Is it occupancy? Is it price? Is it inspection? Is it an appraisal waiver? Things like that. There's different things that it's not always the price that's the most important piece of that.
That's true. 100%.
And I have seen in a few scenarios where, yes, that house is on the market. Yes, they have multiple offers, but they also need some occupancy and they need some time.
And some people don't want to give that to them.
And a lot of people that don't have a house to sell don't want to give that time necessarily. But somebody that might have a house to sell would be willing to give them some occupancy, would be willing to give them some room, wiggle room with their timing. So that situation sometimes works great for both parties.
I mean, let's talk about seller to find suitable housing.
Yeah.
Okay. I've had to do that a few times in my listings. Basically means that the seller needs to find a home in which they want to move into and want some grace. I've had it affected in 2 ways. I've had buyers who had written offers for my sellers and giving them lots of grace.
Yep.
And then I've also had buyers putting themselves in a position that said, no, we would want you out.
Right.
Okay. So basically the strategy is to take those two options, talk to your seller about, here, I know this is the most amount, but
what is most important?
Right. Is occupancy more important or max amount?
You might get the most amount, but you're going to have to rent or stay at a hotel for 3 weeks. And how much is that going to cost you?
A lot.
Too much.
Way too much.
So finding suitable housing is, can sometimes be tricky, but there's things that you can do. I mean, you can put deadlines on things. You can ask them to have something under contract within a certain amount of time. And I'll say for some sellers that are looking to sell but need to be contingent on finding suitable housing, they need to be able to secure what they know they're working with before they can go out and buy something.
Right.
And that ties all the way back to our initial conversation about making sure that when you're selling, you know upfront what your costs are.
Absolutely. Because let's imagine you just basically sit out there and don't know how much your buyer agent fees are going to be because you've made that agreement.
And depending on your house, that could be a substantial amount.
Substantial amount.
I mean, you could be talking anywhere from $3,000 up to $30,000.
I mean, I've never went that high, but I think you have.
Just maybe once. No.
Well, and that brings me back also to the idea that none of these practices, it doesn't matter what bracket someone's in to me.
No,
I don't care if
absolutely
you're
not.
buying a $70,000 house or a $700,000 house. All of these strategies play exactly the same way, just in different ball fields.
The process is the same, no matter what. There's always different circumstances, and we're going to run into different scenarios every single time. None of them are the same. One of the reasons I like this industry so much is because I don't like to do the same thing over and over all the time. But at the end of the day, the process is still the same, and everybody still gets the same service.
Absolutely.
No matter what.
I actually didn't know, and I guess I'll just ask this. What did you do before you were in real estate? I've never known this.
Oh, I was in the
Or maybe you told me and I didn't
in
listen.
the trades field, so I worked for an electrical contractor before
Really?
in the office.
In the office?
Yeah.
Oh, well, look at you go. I didn't
Project
know that.
manager or project administrator. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, or a lot of it, about buyers having to sign contracts to work with their buyers or with their buyer's agent. So there's a couple different things that you can do. So buyers can sign a 1-day contract with an agent. They can sign a 1 property contract with an agent, or they can sign anything for any property in the state of Michigan, or they can sign for any specific amount of time. They just have to sign something, except for one instance.
Open houses.
Open houses.
So, I mean, with open houses, though, that's a huge advantage for buyers to be able to walk in and look
On
at a
their
house.
own schedule, on their own pace.
Here's the negative. How many homes do you miss out on that would not hold an open house?
A lot.
A lot. I mean, in most times, open houses are a strategic way for sellers to procure more buyers in a suitable amount of time in order to get the best offer into their pocket.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if I am a seller, my goal is to have my brokerage or my agent hold open an open house at least 1 to 2 times in the first week of being on market.
For sure.
If those open houses take place, that means you get all unrepresented buyers, right? And you also get all represented buyers through regular showings. We also can use that, though, as a tactical negotiation point in which you may not even have that open house, especially in today's times, if you end up in a multiple offer scenario.
Yeah.
So although it is great for buyers to have that option to walk into an open house, and please do, buyers out there, I want to advocate to you. If you do not
Go to the open houses.
if you do not have a buyer's agent, go to the open houses, meet agents in which you might want to work with, and see who actually offers you the best representation of understanding the market, knowing how to get you through it, and knowing how to get things done for you. But also, going through open houses allows you to learn the market. You see what things are priced at, what you like, what you don't like, and gives you extra houses that you've actually looked at.
I was just going to add in there, even if you're not yet in the market, but let's say you know that within the next 6 months, 2 months, a year, you know that you're going to be looking, or if there's a specific neighborhood that you want to be in, go to the open houses.
I say to my buyers,
Always.
I honestly say to my buyers, if they text me and say, hey, we're going to be looking in a little while, I say, if it is within the next 6 months to 12 months, we need to sit down now.
Oh, absolutely.
And the reason we need to sit down now is so that we can be ready in 6 months to 12 months.
because
not just
tomorrow,
financing.
that house might hit the market that is perfect for what you're looking at.
Absolutely.
And we need to be ready.
And I can't imagine if I say to them, hey, just reach out to me when you see a house you like. I've now put them in such an inadequate spot for the market because we've now got to go through lending, figure it out, make sure all the ducks are in the row, and then still write the offer within 72 hours. Let's say if it's the perfect house for them.
Yeah.
Anything on 5 acres, let's go ahead and just negate that down to 24 to 48 hours.
Anything that has a pole barn.
I mean, so there's so many different levels, like buy, sell then, buyer's agent, open houses. You know, we want our buyers to be informed. So if there's any buyers out there, whether you know your grandmother, aunt, uncle, Bob, Tom, anybody that is looking to purchase in the future, especially first-time home buyers, please reach out to any agent you know, or reach out to Jen or myself or a Modern agent or whatever agent you trust. I don't care what brokerage it's at.
Right.
Just reach out to someone so that you can be better represented.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or if you want one of these handy-dandy client roadmaps, you can reach out to us at Modern Realty. They're actually really great.
They really are. I will say, it's a joke between my clients after we're done with the buyer's consult, like, okay, now keep this, and it's good bathroom reading material, right? But it really is. And there's a lot of, questions or even just pieces of information.
I feel like it's the things you forget. You know how you go to like an
is.
inspection for a home and you get back and you're like, I don't remember what it was. And then they send you the report.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh, yeah, that's right. Or, hey, how about you went to the doctors and they told you all of these things that you're supposed to do. And when you walk out there, you have no idea what they just said.
No idea.
Yeah.
None. I think the client roadmap at Modern is nice because we've restructured it, like I said, in order to make sure that our buyers and our friends all understand what the NAR settlement meant to them. And even though the NAR settlement didn't do anything for the original plaintiffs, the lawyers made the most of the money. But it did allow for us to be open communicators with more of our friends and family and clients because it's important. And that's why we developed this, to make sure all of our buyers and sellers and friends and family and our agents, for that matter, know how to navigate it so that
even
our buyers
if you don't have a clue what the NAR settlement is or what NAR means at all.
National Association of Realtors, friends.
It's still super important if you're buying or selling to sit down with somebody and chat about it, even if you're not ready, if it's coming soon, if you think you're maybe going to be in the spot where you want to buy or you want to sell. Just have the conversation about things.
Please don't TikTok it.
No, don't TikTok. Don't go down the TikTok rabbit hole.
I actually today just wanted to hit some TikToks because I don't have a TikTok. Let me be very clear. I had to Google TikToks about the NAR settlement. And so I watched like the first 10.
Oh,
okay,
gosh.
So it came up on Google. These are all the top ones, right?
Yep.
I determined that it was 4 of 6. I stopped at 6. I couldn't do it anymore. 4 of the 6 actually had like not correct information in them. So 4 of the 6 TikToks you watched had incorrect information on it. Do not trust that.
Yeah,
Sit down with a lender, sit down with a known agent, sit down with your brothers and sisters. I don't know, whoever you trust to know.
I think one of the biggest things that the media portrayed wrong in the settlement is the fact that you don't have to pay a commission anymore.
They really did. I mean, you don't have to. You can negotiate it. Let me be very clear about that.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that.
You do not have to pay a commission. You can choose not to.
No. But if I'm going to have surgery, I want the doctor to be good at what he does.
Absolutely.
He or she.
If I'm going to allow someone to help me make one of my top 3 goals in my life, I need someone behind me that will represent me to the fullest. And that means that you have to pay them. That's a hard thing to say. But you don't go to the doctor and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay you today.
Right. Or I would like you to perform this miraculous knee surgery on me, but I'm not going to pay you. Or I'm only going to pay you half of what you think.
Half of what you think.
Yeah.
Listen to the professionals in this.
Absolutely.
It does make a difference.
This is what we do every single day, all day long. I know that some people think it's just super easy. And I'll be completely transparent. There are some transactions that are extremely easy.
Yes.
And by the grace of God, every once in a while we get those. But there's a lot of transactions that are not.
I would say it's really 50-50, wouldn't you?
Probably.
I mean, as long as I'm in control, the 50% are good. Does that make sense? Because I'm good at what I do.
Yeah.
If I don't have the other control, it's not always great. And there's always unknowns. That's true. But we're not doing this because it is a job, okay? I hate to say that. We are doing it because we love the people we work with, not the circumstances that they have to deal with to sell and buy a home.
Right.
It's not fun. I mean, some people it is fun. I'm fun to hang out with. You're fun to hang out with. But there are parts of the process that are not fun.
There are definitely parts of the process that are not fun. There's some really hard conversations that have to be had sometimes, whether it's on the selling side or buying side. I tell people in my buyer's consultation, there's a lot of things that you have to look at in this conversation or in this process that we're going to have that you have to treat as you're going to your doctor. you have to tell your doctor sometimes some hard, uncomfortable things. There are going to be those times that we might have to have those conversations, but you can trust that it's not going anywhere. And I've probably also heard worse.
Well, or done worse. I'm just kidding. No. I truthfully feel that no matter what hard conversations are going to take place, you have to be able to have them in order to work together as a team. Right?
Oh, you absolutely do.
And
because at the end of the day, we are a team, though.
Yeah.
And the team is not just me and my clients, but the lender also, and
100%.
the inspector, and their insurance agent that they're going to use. We're all working as a team. So to try to leave a piece out here
Don't forget
or there,
title.
Yeah, our lovely title companies.
Our title companies. They work very hard too.
They work extremely hard.
I truthfully just hope that as we move forward from this, this podcast and all of the information we've put through, the client roadmap is available every day. But obviously the information that you or I have and hold, always reaching out to us is a wonderful way to do that.
And you're never bothering.
Unless it's after like 9:02. I'm just kidding. It depends on the day. But maybe 8:02.
That's why they created Do Not Disturb.
That is true.
And you can text me anytime you want.
You can. I'll just respond back when I get up at 5 a.m.
At 5 a.m.
Yeah. How many texts have you gotten from me at 5 a.m.? Quite a few.
Yep.
We truly hope that everybody learned something today.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know I did.
And if you have any questions, don't hesitate.
We are here to let you know the true client roadmap, the true NAR settlement, and making sure everything works well.
Yep.
My goal, get you home confidently and comfortably.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Modern Agent Podcast. Please follow at Modern Realty Midland on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And if you need to buy or sell a house, please reach out to Modern Realty by going to www.modernrealty.us. Modern Realty, your home, our focus.